Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to explore topics, one of the most fundamental components in Copilot Studio, and one you will work with all the time when building your agent. If you have ever built a chatbot that guides users through a set of steps or provides structured help, you have already worked with something like a topic. Let me show you how this works in Copilot Studio. So, topics are basically predefined conversation paths. They help guide the user through a flow of messages, where it's answering a question, collecting information, or completing a task. Now, inside the orchestrator logic, topics are the first thing the agent checks when a user sends a message. So if the message matches a trigger phrase or condition for a topic, that topic kicks in and starts a conversation. And in Copilot Studio, there are two types of topics. We have the system topics and the custom topics. The system topics are built into Copilot Studio, and they handle a lot of the general behind-the-scenes behavior of your assistant. These are the ones that make your agent feel a bit more human and responsive, even before you build any custom logic. So for example, there is one called Conversation Start, and that's the one that kicks in right when the user opens the chat. It controls the welcome message and sets the tone for how the conversation begins. Then there is conversational boosting, which is super helpful. If the user asks something that doesn't match any topic you have defined, the model steps in and tries to generate a relevant response using knowledge or context, kind of like a smart fallback. Escalate is another important one. This is used when your agent needs to hand things off to a human, like connecting the user to a support person. And then there is on error. This one handles those moments when something goes wrong. Maybe a topic breaks or a required input wasn't provided. Then we have the custom topics. The custom topics are where your business logic lives. And there are two groups to be aware of. First, when you create a new agent, Copilot Studio automatically add a few pre-built custom topics like goodbye, greetings, thank you, and start over. These are great for handling common conversational phrases without needing to configure anything yourself. And then you have your manually created custom topics, like the ones that I have added in yellow here. So, for example, request a new laptop or check onboarding status. These are the topics you will build to cover a specific use case. So, next up, I will show you how to create a custom topic, connect it to the flow, and test it inside Copilot Studio. So, let's jump into the demo. Okay, let's explore how to use topics in Copilot Studio. To do that, we will go to the Topics tab. From here, you will see that we have different topics available already. Let's explore the system topics. These topics are created by default every time we create a new agent. This includes topics like the conversation start and conversational boosting or escalate topic. In some cases, you can customize these topics, but if you can avoid to do that, it's better. It's better for you to create custom topics to control the actions or the flow of the conversation. Let's explore, for example, the conversation start. This is a very basic topic, and this is a topic that is used to provide an initial message or welcome message when you start using the agent. So you will see, for example, that the text that we see here is a text that by default has been configured here. It includes this static test and is also including a variable, a system variable that is the bot name. But we can configure this if we want. Let's go back to the system topics. The other important topic is the conversational boosting topic. This topic is used by the agent orchestrator. So basically what happens is that the orchestrator first look at the available topics to determine if there is an existing topic that can be used to answer your specific question. If there are no topics available to answer your question, then it will explore available knowledge sources or available tools to basically be invoked to provide an answer. But if none of those knowledge sources or tools can be used to provide an answer, it will go to the conversational boosting topic. This topic will generate an answer for you based on the knowledge that already has the agent. It's not a knowledge that you have configured, but it's a knowledge that has been used to train the agent by default. You can customize, for example, this topic if you want, but by now we won't do any modification to the system topics. Now, if we go to the custom topics, these are topics that, yes, it is recommended to customize. You can create your own custom topics, but in this case, by default, when you create an agent, there are some custom topics that has been created for you. And it's recommended to keep them and to customize them to provide a more personalized experience. These include the greeting topic, goodbye, and thank you topic. We will explore how they work. So let's go to greeting. If you go to greeting, you will notice that every topic will start, or most of the topics will start with a trigger action. And this trigger action basically determine when this topic will be invoked. What are the trigger phases, or in which particular scenario this topic should be invoked. In this case, we are specifying some trigger phrases. So for example, when someone asks or send a prompt that includes a trigger phrase, good afternoon, good morning, or hello, then this topic should be invoked. It is recommended to put trigger phrases, but you don't need to put several trigger phrases. A few of them are enough. The most important thing is to provide a clear description of how this topic will be used. And then you have different actions that you can configure. For example, if you click here, you will have the most common action is send a message action. Basically, this will allow you to send a text as a response that you can customize, you can configure. But with this action, you can also display a picture, a video, or other type of items such as an attachment, a file, for example. We will explore more of that. You have also the ask a question action. So basically, imagine that you send a prompt and you want to capture some additional information from the user so you can then execute an action. With the ask question, you can configure several questions to ask the user. You can ask with adaptive card. This basically will allow you to configure a card. It could be a form that the user will need to fill out in order to provide information. You can configure conditions. So depending on, for example, the answer of the user, you can execute different logic, different actions or flows. Another interesting one is the topic management, because it's a best practice to create and to split your logic in multiple topics instead of a single very complex topic. So depending on the actions or the responses that the user provide, you can, for example, determine to then go to another topic that has a more complex logic to provide an answer to that particular question. You have the option also to add a tool. This will allow you to select a list of tools that you have previously configured. So if you remember, we created these tools or we configured these tools or actions in a previous video. You can use them as part of the conversational flow in your topic. Now let's customize our greeting topic. But before doing that, let's test how this works by default. So if I say, for example, hi, and actually let me click here to see how the orchestrator identify which topic to use. So I say if I send hi to the agent, it will determine that the greeting topic is the most appropriate to invoke. And this will send a simple message, hello, how can I help you today? That's it. However, I want to customize this topic. So if I go to greeting, instead of providing that simple message, I already have a more detailed message that I want to include here. So I'm just gonna copy and paste this text. So let's replace this. And let's paste this. And you will notice that in this case, I'm including some formatting. I'm including a valid list. I'm including some formatting. I'm including details on what this agent can do for me. I'm including even emoticons. So let me save this change. And I can also use variables or functions. So let's use a very simple variable. Let's say that I want to, for example, say hi to the user. So if you remember in a previous video, we saw how we can use system variables. One of the system variables is the display name of the user. So I'm going to select that and I'm going to save it. Now, there are several other things we can do with this message action. For example, if I click on add, you will see that I can add message variation. Basically, the message variation will allow me to add different variations of this text. So let's say that every time someone asks hello or hi, instead of always showing the same text, I can have multiple options and the agent will randomly invoke a specific text to display. So it's not always the same. But I also have the option to add a file. Maybe it's a PDF file with some guidance, it's an image or a video, or even an adaptive card. But for this example, I'm gonna select a quick reply option. The quick reply is an option that will allow me to configure like a follow-up prompt. It will guide the user on what what additional questions I can ask to the agent. So in this case, for example, I'm gonna configure a few prompts. The text is gonna be the prompt that will appear once someone clicks on a particular boot, and the title is basically the title that will appear. So I don't need to provide the full prompt, because maybe the prompt is a large text, but a description of what this prompt will do. So I'm gonna add 3 of them. Let me add one more here. For example, what are the key onboarding milestones? And instead of showing the full text, I'm just gonna show onboarding milestones. And one more, this is gonna be to register a new hire. So this will invoke the specific action that we previously configured to register an item in a SharePoint list. Important to notice that I can send a message, but I can also configure this to open a URL. So if I click on one of the buttons, maybe I invoke a specific website or portal, or I can make a call. This is more for more complex scenarios like invoking a specific API. So let's click on save. Perfect. And with that, let's refresh and try again. Let's say hello. This has invoked the greeting topic. This is displaying the information, including my name and the details with the corresponding formatting, and also is showing me the follow-up prompts. If I click on this particular prompt, for example, or this particular option, this will send this text, and this will invoke the different, will use the orchestrator to determine which knowledge source or action to invoke. And as we saw before, this basically have identified a corresponding knowledge source to provide a response for me. Now, it's great to configure our existing topics or system topics if we want, but it's better to create our own topics. So I'm gonna continue exploring that, and by creating my first new topic. I can do that by using Copilot. So if I provide some instructions, Copilot will help me create the logic or the flow of my topic. But in this case, I'm gonna create my topic from blank. So remember that to start, you need to provide a description on when to invoke this topic. So let's say that for this example, what I want to do is I want to configure a specific topic that will allow me to return some guidance related to HR policies. So my topic name is going to be HR policies. And for the description, I'm going to copy the following text. So this topic will be used to answer questions related to HR policies, and I'm providing some sample questions or sample trigger phrases or prompts like when does health insurance coverage begin, what is the company's dress code policy, etc. Right? I can provide more trigger phrases or a better description if I want. I'm gonna save this. So this is a very critical action. Perfect. Now we can configure our action. Remember that we have different options. Just for the purpose of testing if my topic is working successfully, I'm just gonna add a message. And I'm gonna write, this is the HR policies topic. So let's test this topic. Let me, for example, select one of these, and let's refresh and test. And it has identified the corresponding topic and is sending this specific test. It's a very simple scenario. Now, something important to mention here. If I send this prompt and I have not configured a topic, probably what the agent will do or the orchestrator will do is first to look at the available knowledge sources. The flow is that the orchestrator manages is always it prioritizes the topics first, then the knowledge, and then the tools. The reason why they do that is because the topics are used for more deterministic scenarios where I want to have more control over the conversation on what to ask and how to respond, right? So for those particular scenarios, you should use a topic. And that's the reason why when I ask that particular question, instead of looking into the available knowledge sources, is looking directly into the list of topics, and it has identified that this particular topic will be used to answer this specific question. Now let's go back to the topics, again to HR policies, and let's continue configuring this text. So I'm going to replace this text action, and I'm going to use another one which is very interesting, which is that actually is in the advanced section, which is the generative answers. So the generative answers is an action that leverages generative AI capabilities available in Copilot Studio to generate an answer for you. So you don't need to put the text or the response manually, but instead, based on the input that you provide and the specific knowledge that you configure, it will generate a response for you. So you need to provide an input. The input in this case will need to be a specific variable. So it's going to be a system variable. So if you click here and you go to, for example, system, and then you search for last message, there is a system variable that basically determines what's the last message that you have sent to the agent. So when you select this, basically this is the text that this action will receive as an input. Then the other option that you have to do is you have to configure the specific knowledge source that will be used to answer this question. So in this case, if I click edit and if I go here, I have an option to select a specific knowledge sources. So if I click this option, this will show the available knowledge sources that I have previously configured. In this case, I want to answer that particular question using this specific knowledge source, only this document. And I'm gonna just click on save. Before doing that, just let me remove this option because this will allow me basically to use the general knowledge available that was used to train the agent, and I don't want to do that. I want to use only this document to provide an answer. And I can also customize a little bit how this agent should provide an answer, but in this case, let's just do this very basic configuration. Okay, perfect. With that already we have what we need, but let me do a final change. In this case, once I receive that answer, I want to send a message, and this message is gonna be, for example, I'm gonna guide the user on what else they can ask. So for example, do you want to know more about HR? And I'm gonna add some quick replies similar to the previous case. And here I have a few examples that I'm gonna configure. So for example, I can also ask this question, and I have this text, and let me add one more. So these specific questions can be answered by that particular knowledge that I have selected, which is the FAQ document that we previously configured as a knowledge source. Perfect. And finally, one best practice is to add a final action in the topic management section, which is end current topic. So basically, this will determine that the conversation or this particular conversation has ended. Okay, so let's try again and see what happened in this case. But before doing that, again, let me go to the topic and let me select the same question just for the purpose of the demo. So if I ask this question, it will invoke the HR policies topic, and it will generate an answer for me, and it's generating the answer from this specific document that I have created. Then it's providing me the message that I previously configured, and then it's providing me also some specific trailing prompts or follow-up prompts. So if I click here, this will again execute this prompt, and it will again invoke the HR policies topic and will create an answer for me based on this specific document. Now, you will say, why did I create a topic for this particular scenario if I can allow the agent to use the available knowledge to provide an answer? And that's correct. However, typically what the agent will do is will look into multiple documents that I have configured and will try to generate an answer for me from multiple documents. If I want to have more control for it, very specific scenarios like this, for example, I know that every time someone asks about HR policies, you should only use this specific document, then this is a good scenario where we can use a topic and where we can be more prescriptive. The idea is to avoid having to create multiple topics, only use topics when needed, but this is a way to show you how you can get benefits from using topics. Okay, now let's test one more scenario. Let's go to topics again, and I'm going to create a blank topic. And we will use this topic to register a new hire. If you remember, we previously created a tool or an action to register a new hire, but this time we will do that through that topic. And we will have like more control through that topic to determine what to ask and how to respond. So again, similar to like the previous case, I have to provide a detailed description of this topic. So I already have that description. So again, this is a detailed description, and I'm telling to use this topic to help users register new hires to start their onboarding process. And then I add in multiple trigger phrases like register a new hire, add a new employee to the onboarding list, and others. Let me just save this change. Then if you remember in the list that we previously created, and we can again go here and see the new hire list, we have different fields available here, and we will ask for that information to the user. So in this case, remember that like in previous scenarios, we have the send a message action, but instead of doing that, in this time I'm gonna ask a question. So for example, I'm gonna ask, what is the full name, or what is the name of the new employee, for example. No? And when you configure this action, you need to specify how to identify this information. So if you click, by default is multiple choice options. This will allow you, for example, if there are a list of options that you can select, you can configure and add each of those options, so the user only will choose one of them, and this will invoke a set of actions. But in this case, it's just a text, but it's not any type of text. Actually, you have different options here, and you can select and identify that we are referring to a person name. So I'm going to select that. And then you will notice that below there is a variable that will store this information. So if by default it's bar1, but I'm going to change that value, and I'm going to put the name here, bar full name. Perfect. And this is a string. Okay, then the other thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask a question for the email. So what is the email address of the new employee? In this case, we will use the email type of data. This is helpful because if, for example, I provide a different text, a different input, the agent will ask me again to provide the information in the correct format. If not, it will not receive that information. This is let's configure this variable as email, and it's a string. Then let's add a couple more. For example, ask question, and what is the role of the, or what is the department of the new employee, and you can put an example here: engineering, operation, IT support. This is just a text, so let's say you can use the entire response. We can also create our own variables, our own entities or entity types. We can do that later if we want. We don't need to choose everything here, but by now we will use just users entire response. This is gonna be the department. And finally, let's add the role. Ask a question: what is the role of the new employee? And let's put an example. This will be software engineer, data scientist, or analyst. Perfect. Again, in this case, it's gonna be just use the entire response, but we can configure and make sure that there is a list of options available to select. And let's choose role. Okay, let me save this. And just to make sure that this is working as expected, I'm gonna create a message text, and in this message, I'm gonna basically display the information that the user has provided me. So the full name, in this case, if I click on insert variables, we will see the variables that we previously created. So I'm gonna select that. Then the other one is full name, email, the same. We will select the email. Then, for example, it's gonna be the department and the role. And let me configure the formatting so it's easier to see the information, and maybe I can use bullet points. Okay, perfect. And remember, the best practice when configuring our topics is just to add an end current topic action. One more thing, we are executing the register a new hire topic, but we also have a tool or an action that executes this option. To avoid confusion, what you will need to do is the following. You will need to go to Tools, you will need to click your existing action, and then if you remember, there in additional details, there is an option that says allow agent to decide dynamically when to use this tool. If I uncheck this, you will see that below it explains that it can only be used when explicitly referenced by an agent or a topic. We will execute this same action through our topic, but by now we will test this only unchecking this option. Let me save. We can go back to the topics and let's test if this is working as expected. So in this case, I'm gonna send the prompt register a new hire. Now, this is displaying an error message. The reason is because the action and the topic has the same name. To avoid that, I'm just gonna update the name of my topic, and I'm gonna specify create a new hire. Save, refresh, and try again. And it has invoked my topic successfully and is basically asking the question. So what's the name of the new employee? It's Pedro Martinez. The email, the department, engineering, and this is an analyst. And finally, it is returning the information that I previously provided. Now, the recommended step here should be to invoke the action that or the tool that we previously created through the topic. But instead of doing that, I'm going to do something better. I'm going to create an agent flow that will have a more complex logic, and I will invoke that agent flow through my topic. But we will review that in our next video. Now you have seen how topics let your agent guide users through structured, helpful conversations, a key part of creating a smooth user experience. In the next video, we will explore agent flows and how you can use them to make your agent take real action, like creating records or triggering automations. If you're enjoying the series, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It really helps support the channel and lets me know what you are finding most useful. See you there.